Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Extreme Radio, built by MDI Construction Inc. Just remember, MDIConst.com for all of your commercial construction needs. That's MDIConst.com. Search them up on Facebook to look at their latest projects. Spencer Thompson, James Shannon, and Trent Legate here on first weekend of National Football League play. But, of course, we're focused on 8-man football. But, Trent will probably get into a little bit of a ramble here on his fantasy team, of course. But we're
trying to snap.
Of course. Of course. All right, so if you haven't looked at our social media already, then we're here to tell you the scores of this past weekend. A lot of blowouts, unfortunately. Only one good game, and that was the game we didn't go to, which was down in Alabama with New Life, of course. And we do have a bunch of other stuff to go over on the show, aside from recapping each of these games. We got an interview with the coach from the Heat, Ryan Scott, as well as Corey Davis is back to give some college advice. And then we'll, of course, announce which game confirmed is our broadcast for the Extreme Game of the weeks this weekend, and give our predictions on this next week. A full slate of games this Friday and such, but let's get right into the scores. I think James is wanting to.
Have already rebuilt, and they're hitting their stride and they're going full force. So unfortunately, it's one of those weekends we have to have, but we have to have it because of the fact we have divisions and conferences. So.
You are right with that, of course. Now let's get into the scores. So the Battle of the Bluegrass, as James calls it, Bowling Green Christian Academy dominated the Madisonville Defenders 76-8. So Bowling Green getting their first win on the season. Madisonville, unfortunately, remains winless, and I believe James was right on his predictions there and such, and same with Trent. But almost a 70-point win, win for Bowling Green over Madisonville and such. It's kind of, unfortunately, with the way we've seen Madisonville play, and they're the only independent team we cover now with the Tennessee School for the Deaf dropping out and such, and Central Baptist dropping out. But is this what we expected with this week, James?
James was wrong.
I didn't quite know what to expect. I did pick Bowling Green. I went back and looked. I did pick Bowling Green over Madisonville. For Bowling Green, they had a tough game with Swanee, which Swanee, obviously now at 3-0, they're looking really good. Bowling Green, they struggled against South Haven in the first game of the year. So I think the team was kind of forming an identity. And for me, I'm waiting it for 3 games. I'm going to let a team play 3 games, and then we'll know their identity. We'll know what they're going to look like, because basing it off of 1 or 2 games is kind of weak. But if you can go 3 games and then make an assessment, then I think it'll be pretty accurate. But yeah, I mean, it just got crazy. Madisonville struggles. I was able to go to practice on Tuesday, and I was talking to Coach Jones. He said, the thing that we struggle with is we never know how many guys are going to show up to practice, because they're not a school. Am I back? Okay. Anyways, the thing they struggle with for Madisonville is, they're not a school. They're not where the guys are together all day. They come from several different schools. So, you kind of have to depend on the guys and their parents to be fully committed, and sometimes they're not. And so, like Tuesday night, they only had 9 guys show up to practice, and I guess they had 13, maybe 14 show up Friday night. So it's just tough. It's already tough if you have a school with low numbers, but then you have a team that you never know how many guys are going to show up. And so that's tough. But, the great win for Bowling Green, big statement win on homecoming to kind of gain some momentum. And, of course, keep that Battle of the Bluegrass at 2-0 for those guys. So big win for them.
My turn. Yeah. Yeah, well, y'all know, as a group, we know I like Bowling Green. Okay, it's not disguised. I like Bowling Green. I like how they play. This does not surprise me that they scored 76 points. I mean, I would have. But Madisonville's good. They have their strong areas in Madisonville. I think they're stronger in defense than they are offense. Like I said, that Eddie Brown. I would love to have the stats on these games to really see how that I have on my hit list are still going. But right now, I like Bowling Green. I think they have a really good tempo offense, especially with the quarterback Brown and the wide receivers like Riley does. I really like how they're playing, and I like Bowling Green. I think this is a good win, big win for them. You can win them back up for the rest of the season.
You both arrive at that, and as Trent has said, Bowling Green Warriors. Not biased, but more he does enjoy Bowling Green. And he said that he thinks they're going to come back really strong this year and such. But I think Trent's got one more thing here.
I was right, and James was wrong on that prediction, by the way.
What's that?
You picked Madisonville. I picked Bowling Green.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I missed that one. I picked Bowling Green. I picked Bowling Green. I know I picked Bowling Green. I picked Bowling Green. For the record. Anyways.
Anyway, so looking, so another big score that we looked at, and this isn't the Crusaders team that we've seen play in the previous games, but Christian Community dominated Hendersonville Christian 58-0, and that was up in Hendersonville. So for Christian Community to keep that undefeated streak going, and this is one of the predictions that James, everybody has their ideas of homers and such. But the thing with that, James, is that although you may have somewhat graduated under the homeschool program from Christian Community, you predicted them to go 9-1, but their only loss on the season that you predicted against the Freedom Cowboys ended up to be a win. So Christian Community just looks like an unstoppable force in the North. But we do look ahead to the season a little bit, as they will be facing the South Haven Christian School Patriots on the 29th. So that's not this coming weekend, but the next weekend. But Christian Community really looks like a dominant force in the MTAC North.
Yeah, well, it's 2 weekends from now, but South Haven's really surprised me as well. For CCS, especially after Freedom beat Franklin Christian, I didn't quite know how to take that one. I still felt confident in my pick, but I mean, these guys come out strong. CCS, they still have to play Classical. They still have to play South Haven. They're going to play. They still have some undefeated teams on the roster. So they still have some tests coming up for them, but so far so good. They're doing all right. They're doing well, and really happy to see that. Not as a guy from 8-Man Extreme, but as an alum, I'm happy to see them doing well. But from the 8-Man Extreme side of it, I'm still happy to see them doing well. But in terms of the fact that teams aren't stinking it up and teams are doing all right. So good to see that. For Hendersonville, still struggling. It only moves them to 2-on-2. It is a division loss, but that they only have one of those so far here on the year. So they're not dead. They're still, they're not active for the playoffs because they declared that they were ineligible for the playoffs because of players. They were open and honest about that. But in terms of their season, I mean, they're only 2-2, and they still have a lot of ball games to play. I think they still have 6 games on the schedule. So, they have some teams coming up that are some winnable games, and we'll see what happens with that.
By the way, I picked FCS on that game, winning that one, and I like FCS. CCS. I picked CCS to win that game. I wasn't looking at my fantasy football. I wasn't seeing how Devontae Adams was doing. Totally wasn't doing that. CCS, I think they got I would say they have the best defense in right now, but I really like FCA's defense. I think it's a tie, in my opinion. But Hendersonville, I think in Hendersonville, my opinion, I'm just gonna let it out. I think Bader's the best quarterback in MTech.
You think Franklin Christian's defense is up there with CCS? You mean Classic or FCA? Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about FCA. I'm talking about Minor and Meeks and Weeks.
Well, I was going to say something about their game against CCS, but they did have a bunch of injuries, and that played a factor into it. So, things happen. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I like how CCS is going. They're undefeated right now, aren't they? They're 3-0. 5-0. Okay, 5-0. So they're still going really strong right now in MTech. But I think seeing what was the score?
The score from that one was 58-0. Yes.
Okay. So, but I heard a little something about Bader had a little injury.
Yeah, he from what I heard, he had a broken bone in his wrist, and that happened with the web game. So he's had 2 weeks for it to heal. So you would have thought maybe it would have picked up a little bit, but for those guys, I think you were just trying to get him in there and get him back in the groove of things. But I heard, obviously they struggle, and that's going to happen throughout the course of a season. Guys are going to take injuries and struggle, so you definitely don't like to see that. But
yeah, and like I said, I think Bader is probably the best mobile quarterback. He can throw on the run. In my opinion, he's the best quarterback at MTech right now. I really like watching him play, and I like Hendersonville, and I would like CCS. I think they're both two good programs. I honestly thought this game Hendersonville was going to get some points on the board, make it a really close game, but CCS they've been dominant.
Yes, CCS has, and they remain undefeated, yet to have a loss, and we'll see how they fare out going through the rest of the season, as they will be at Riverside. Looks like yes, they will be at Riverside this Friday. All right, so the next game, we'll get to the extreme game of the week that we broadcast last, but next we'll get to St. Andrews Swanee dominated the Tennessee Heat 52-0, so the St. Andrews Swanee Mountain Lions stay undefeated in the South as well, and it's really interesting to see how this plays out with St. Andrews Swanee. The Mountain Lions, they have not had a championship in their school's history for any sport, so they're having a really promising season going in here. And, of course, the Tennessee Heat, they have declared that they are out of playoff contention, unfortunately. And they have some struggles that they're going with. And we'll talk with Coach Ryan Scott about that with their interview and such. But, James, I mean, St. Andrews Swanee, are they unstoppable?
This offense that they use, it's different. Teams aren't used to facing it. And I've said it before. But, teams aren't used to facing a team that runs the ball 45 times a game, potentially 50 times a game, just to constantly run that ball, run the clock, keep the ball in bounds, burn 5, 6, even sometimes 7 minutes off the clock, and really put not so much put a score crunch. It's like the Riverside game that Trent, you and I were at. They didn't run up the score on Riverside. They didn't really whoop Riverside, but they killed them with time. They ran time off the clock like nobody's business, and then they would score at the end of the drive. So, they're up 7-0 with 4 minutes left in the first quarter. Well, then you're going to get in a little bit of a rush because, yeah, you do have the second quarter, but at the same time, you're thinking, okay, well, before they get the ball back and eat another 6 or 7 minutes up, I need to score and tie it up because if they can do it one time, they're going to do it again.
Yeah, I think I remember like one drive was like 7 or 8 minutes. That's crazy.
Bowling Green, they had the ball for 27 minutes of the ball game, which if you've got 4 12-minute quarter, 28, that's a 48-minute game. You're burning up 27 minutes of it, so you have the ball for like 65% of the game. Any team playing that is going to have to play really well to overcome that because if you have a significant amount of time that you have the ball less than your opponent, that's going to put more pressure on you.
One thing I would like to say about Sewanee, they are a full game team. They aren't a team that will just play you one half and then take a seat the rest of the game. They play all 4 quarters like they started on the first quarter and they end how they started on. They end the fourth quarter how they started on the first.
Yeah, and we'll of course St. Andrews Swanee staying undefeated, and they have a big matchup next week. We'll preview that towards the end of the show. All right, Franklin Classical School hosted the Freedom Cowboys. We did have on the helmet schedule that they were supposed to be down in Alabama, but there's just a little bit of miscommunication. It was a Knights home game hosting Freedom. 38-16 the score in that one. The Knights stay undefeated as well. From what we've seen from FCS, Trent, I mean, the Franklin Classical School Knights, it's hard to find any flaw with them. I mean, their defense has a little bit of issue, preventing complete shutouts, as we've even seen in James and I specifically saw that when they went to Mount Juliet to face off against the Tennessee Heat, that they were racking up points quick. This is what James mentioned kind of on the broadcast last night for our game at Riverside, is that FCS, they put up points quick. They know how to just get the offensive drive going. They've got dominant forces like Cole Warren. They know how to quickly go through and just get points on the board and score up there. But their defense has a little bit of lacking as well from what we saw in the Heat game, is that they had the mercy rule enacted, but the Heat kept fighting back and getting that mercy rule voided. So some things on defense that are needed to be looked at for FCS, but I mean, their offense, I think it makes up for it.
For FCS, coaching. I mean, you get a coach. His first year back, as James just told me, his first year back, and look what's happening. I remember last year playing them. I really enjoyed that game too. Playing them, and they were okay. And they were up with them, so they improved immensely after losing Jax. More dominant players. He was at the All-Star game. One of their more dominant players after losing him, but losing one of your most dominant players. Yeah, they have shot how we're going to play this year with a new coach, and I think they have really. And for the other team, which is Freedom. I don't know anything about Freedom besides they played FCS. Oh, and I picked FCS in that game, by the way.
Yeah, I missed the pick. I had Freedom picked, and I didn't know how that game was going to go. So yes, I missed that pick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, a big statement win for Classical. And almost kind of like a triangle away for them to get one up on FCA, because FCA lost. Anyways, much love to FCA. A lot of love to them. They played a great game Friday, but it was a great win for Classical, and just to kind of keep the ball rolling. They're 3-0 now, so it really helps. Of course, the Tennessee Alabama series at 2-2 now. Thanks, guys. Anyways, 3 games in Alabama. We're 2-1. Then you come up here and we're 2. Anyways, so or 1-2. Anyways, so big win for those guys, and a big congrats to Coach Witherington and those guys. We will have them on Friday, so we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second.
Yeah, speaking of Alabama, we had the Webb School representing Tennessee. They went down to New Life, which is about it's about central eastern, like a little bit south of Huntsville down there in Alabama. And it was a close game at halftime from the tweet updates we were getting from the athletic director of the Webb School, Scott Dorsett. We were getting the updates from there, and it was a close game throughout, but towards the end it looked like, unfortunately, Webb lost 64-49 against New Life. But from what we saw in scoring updates for that game, they stayed pretty close, and they put up a good fight against New Life. And both of the teams were going into that game undefeated. So Webb does have a loss on their season. It doesn't affect them in conference or in their division. It just affects, overall record standings and such. But I mean, from that game, we at least know one thing about Webb. They fight back, as well as we saw that in the Hendersonville game that they won. We at least didn't see that from Webb, is that they can fight back.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't quit. They kept coming back, and it was I want to say it was a 1-score game. I think it was like it was a 1-score game with about 5 minutes left, and New Life just pulled ahead. But yeah, New Life moves to 3-0, and in terms of Alabama 8-man football, they're a really strong competitor this year. If you take a look at some of their games, so it's good to see. Webb. They didn't quit. They kept fighting, and they had a lot of playmakers and a lot of guys be real superstars. So good to see those guys. Of course, they're back in action against Madisonville Friday night. So maybe a way for them to get back up in the saddle and get rolling.
All I gotta say is I did lose that game. And another thing I say is I want to watch Webb play, because what it sounds like is they like to stand, they like to fight, they don't like to lay down and lose.
Webb next week on our doubleheader. We've got FCA at Swanee and then Classical at Webb. So 2 huge MTAC South games, and that'll really sort out the MTAC South and the way that everything is going to look. So a couple big games there that we'll have. We'll get to see Webb and their offense. We'll get to see Classical's offense, Swanee, their defense, and then, of course, FCA, their offense and their defense, that it really clicked and hit all cylinders on Friday night.
Speaking and of course, Friday night, we did get to witness all of those cylinders clicking and such. 65-6, the score for FCA, just completely dominating Riverside in that game. And we at least saw a score towards the end for Riverside, and they got a touchdown towards the end. I think it was one of their freshmen who got that rushing score there. Or maybe one of their sophomores or younger guys. But Riverside still has yet to get a win on the season, and both of the teams going into that game, the Falcons of Franklin and the Knights of Riverside, both of them needed to at least have a win in that game to kind of keep their hopes alive, at least maybe for the bowl game in terms of regular season records and such. But in terms of, South standings, FCA stands undefeated at 1-0, but Riverside, they're now 0-2 on their, or actually they're 0-3 on their South standings. So the best Riverside could really hope for, I don't even think they're eligible for bowl playoff because of that, unfortunately. So they may result in what happened last year with Hendersonville and FCS, is that their records were not upstanding enough to where they played a game on the last the week of the semifinals and the bowl game, where they just played a final scrimmage for the heck of it. So unfortunately, Riverside taking that loss and such, but at least they can look forward and try to just finish out the season well and try to finish strong.
Yeah, they've got such a young team, and they do have some seniors on there, but just a huge blow that they took last week, losing their their sophomore quarterback with some surgery, and he's out for the season. So they had to move some guys around different positions. John Trahan has to try to play quarterback now. When in reality, if he could play running back, his true position, he would be a real star. But at quarterback, he's just struggling, and it's just one of those years for the guys. For Riverside, everybody has them. Classical and South Haven had them last year. Riverside's had them the last few years, and so it's kind of a cycle. Everyone struggles. Everyone has a year where they're down a little bit. And I think they understand that, but they also know that the time will come where all these young players. I mean, they had a guy. I want to say he's a sophomore. I'm going to double check myself. A guy named Crutcher Ezel almost had an interception off of a Daniel Holcomb pass. I think it was intended for Shindell. It just went right through his hands. So they have a lot of bright spots, and they have a lot of guys to look forward to seeing them play. But I don't, I think they're just going to struggle this year, and they've got some potential winnable games, some toss-up games. I wanted to get that guy. He's a freshman, so a big play by the freshman. But anyways, yeah, they're going to struggle, and that was kind of expected. But at the same time, they're as long as they keep fighting, they really have nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, I watched that. I watched a little bit of that game. My dad took me out to give me my birthday present, which day on that game was my birthday. I mean, I had to say it. It went down.
Happy birthday. Anyways, no, it's not your birthday.
Okay, yeah, but besides that, I was trying to watch the game as much as I could watching the broadcast, and from the player I saw, most that stood out to me was Minor either caused the fumble or picked up the fumble, and it was a scoop and score. Don't know what happened really.
What you're talking about? Trahan was behind the line and he threw a forward pass, but it was behind the line of scrimmage, and the player dropped it, and so technically it was a fumble because it was still behind the line. And everyone stopped playing, but Minor had the heads up, and the officials had the heads up to not blow the whistle. But Minor had the heads up to grab the ball and run for the touchdown. So that's what happened.
One thing I think we should mention as well, that was I'm pretty sure I'll probably mention it on the broadcast, but that was the officials' first 8-man game, if I'm right.
They said it was. So I think they did a pretty solid job. They said that 3/4 of the rule book that they have to memorize is dedicated to 8-man. But for the most part, it's the same. Football is football. There's just a couple little tweaks to make for 8-man, but it's nothing that makes the game significantly different.
And just one more thing I want to say is I got that game right too, as well.
Me too. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, of course, and yeah. The referee did say that in the rule book it was about 3/4 of a page was dedicated to 8-man football, but 90% of that 3/4 was dedicated to if it's a short-sided field, which it wasn't, and that's only like 10% of the rules changed there, of course. So All right. So that's the end of the score updates. Of course, a lot of blowouts. The only good, at least close game was with New Life in the Webb School. But yeah. So next portion of our show here is we've got a special interview today. The Tennessee Heat is going through a little bit of unfortunate not having any victories so far in the season, but they're looking a little bit towards the future with their games and the youth on their team. And we have head coach Ryan Scott here on live on the show here to give us his thoughts and everything. How is your NFL kickoff Sunday going over there, Ryan?
It's going fine. I'm glad I can hear you guys. I was not really able to hear much, but you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you just fine, man.
Excellent. Yeah, it's going fine. Disappointed the Titans lost. But
yeah, so are we, man.
Didn't get to see the end of it either, but hopefully they'll be like us. Hopefully there's some brighter days ahead. So they had a tough matchup to get against the Raiders. So.
All of us up here were upset about that, Coach. Right before we got on here to get set up for the show, James and I just looked at each other like, "Come on, man." We're just like, "What's going on here?"
They were in it, but thanks for having me on the show, guys. I appreciate it.
That little clip that they have on the ESPN Monday Night Football, they do the "Come on, man" with the goo. That might be just the topic of conversation, just that game and the Titans' performance.
Right. You're right. All right, Coach. First thing we want to ask you is, we were at the game where you guys hosted the Franklin Classical Knights, and towards the end of the first half, we had Clint Collins go have a little bit of a heat of the moment. Not to make any puns on your team there, but he had a little bit of had just a little bit of just some fury within him, and we talked a little bit about it on the show, but we want to hear what's the situation with Clint Collins and everything, and what's going on with him.
Yeah, that evening was just unfortunate on many levels. We were hoping to turn some corners. It was a very challenging game against CCS the week before, and kind of really helped us see some immaturity and some things that we really needed to improve on. And so we were really looking forward to the Franklin Classical game. It was a great week of practice. I praised Clint all week long. He had the best week of practice in his entire time under my coaching. And so I was really excited about his impact on the game, as well as our quarterback, Kanan White, and others that had prepared really well for the game. I thought we had a good game plan. Thought everybody was in good spirits. And so, we hit some adversity early. We were, being competitive, but Kanan was struggling with just his nerves. He was a little bit jittery, and he just had said he was having some anxiety. And so we weren't hitting some passes, not getting the first downs. And on my, you probably should have ran the ball a little more. Didn't, tried to take advantage of some opportunities to throw, and probably should have gone to the run a little sooner. And so that's on me. But needless to say, Kanan made a bad read on a slant route, and the first penalty that Clint incurred was on a ball that Kanan threw him the slant when there was a guy in the flat there, and the corner was open, and so it was just the wrong read, and yet Clint caught the ball, met a host of tacklers, and got real frustrated, and he spiked the ball. So they gave him an unsportsmanlike conduct for that. He had kind of gotten frustrated with his teammates, feeling like they should have blocked more. But again, it was just a misinterpretation on his part. It was just a bad read by our quarterback. And anyway, so that was the first part. And I think that, as you said, he just got a little bit upset and kind of lost his composure. And on a blown coverage, Franklin Classical went for a long touchdown. He chased the young man down in the end zone, took a cheap shot on him in the back, and then was flagged with his second unsportsmanlike, and then he was ejected from the game. So, Clint's a good young man. I've really enjoyed all the time I've had to coach him. He's super talented. Just really a joy to spend time with. But I think has made a few decisions that has not only affected his opportunity to play with us going forward, but also has affected his teammates significantly. So, just a really unfortunate night. And then on top of Clint's decision to quit the team the next day, it was his choice. He wasn't kicked off the team. He chose to resign. And then Kanan White informed me that same afternoon that due to frustration and not really wanting to play quarterback, he and his parents made the decision to quit the team. And I believe, I'm not 100% sure on this, I believe that he is trying to play football for Oakland High School as a receiver. That's what he wants to do. And so I really try to encourage him not to do that, to stay with his commitment to his teammates. But he elected that was what was in his best interest. And so we had a team meeting on Monday night after those two resignations. And then we had another young man resign as well, Brock Hawley. And yet the rest of the boys decided that they wanted to press on, and they wanted to commit to one another and start rebuilding for the future and play some football. So that's what we're trying to do.
Hey, Coach, Trent here. I don't know if you listened to the broadcast last week, but I kind of hit on the Clint Collins thing, and I think it probably. I was wondering how badly younger players, one of your leaders, do that, and the team. I was wondering how it affected your younger players.
Not Trent. I'm not sure I got all of that, but I did get the last part. Let me see if I can answer it, and if I missed your question, you can re-ask it. But I think there's been some positive and some negatives to the resignations of these other three young men. I think that we have had a lot of individualistic attitudes as a team going into the first three games of the season. Everybody was kind of looking for their opportunities and yet not really yet bought into this team idea that football is such a wonderful game that provides that opportunity to surrender to self and to play for your brother. And so we just really hadn't matured there. And so on some levels, great disappointment. A lot of boys had their feelings hurt, disappointed, and felt betrayed a little bit from the decisions made from these three young men. But on the other side of it, I think from a standpoint of the place we need to go as a team, it's really brought some good catalysts to unifying us and helping us all start to kind of put our heads around working together as one unit. So there's pluses and minuses. It's bittersweet, but regardless of the decisions made. And as you all know with football, we got to look at the game that's next. And that's all we really can worry about is at this point, we play Bowling Green Christian on Saturday night. And we think that we'll match up well and be competitive and hopefully get our first win of the season.
Yeah, we'll be at that game on Saturday night. Coach, their first four games really of the season. Of course, you had Hendersonville Christian, big rivalry game for you guys, coming off the co-op from last year. But then you guys played Christian Community, Franklin Classical, and then this past Friday you played Swanee, who all three currently are undefeated. They're strong playoff contenders. Just really good ball teams. So you guys didn't start out with a cupcake schedule at all. You guys kind of hit the ground running and just jumped in head first. So is that something you can use for the guys here on the back end of the schedule? Because I know you guys have a game against Madisonville coming up. You've got Riverside, who's struggling a little bit. You got FCA, who just picked up their first win. Of course, Bowling Green on Saturday night, who got their first win past Friday. So having some winnable games here in the back end of the schedule, is that something you can use with the guys to kind of use it to boost morale and kind of as a motivation that, hey, you guys weathered the storm with some of these really good teams, and now we've got a chance to make a lot of noise?
Yeah, I think we've tried to encourage the boys with the fact that we have, been tested early. I do think that where we have, from the start of the season even to still where we reside, we've got some talented athletes. We don't have a lot of football experience, a little bit, but not a deep level of experience there. And so, as you guys know, when you face good teams that are disciplined, physical, we faced some pretty decent physical teams so far. Certainly Swanee was this last week. And these young men our boys are learning that there's some things about football that we've got to get better in. And these games that are coming up do give us that opportunity to, nobody wants to lose every game of the season, and that can be very discouraging. But our motto this year is press on, and we are not only trying to press on because of our desire to learn more about Jesus and grow in our relationship with Him as a team that is promoting that understanding of using football to understand how to live our lives in a way that connects to that love and knowledge of Jesus Christ. But we also want to press on and never quit, and understand that there's adversity in life, and that there's good lessons learned in this season. So, anything that's really great, any great accomplishment, it doesn't come easy. And if it came really easy to us this year after coming out of a rebuilding kind of structure last year with HCA, and then now coming into our first year back together with a new offense, a new defense, just a lot to learn, just learning one another. It just really does provide some great challenges for us. And what I hope it's going to be is a sweet end to when we one day are a championship football team. And when that comes really is determined by a lot of factors. But our motto as a program, as a Heat football team, is we're going to press on, and we're not going to quit. We're not going to quit on one another, and we're not going to quit on homeschool football. So we're just going to keep coming to work and look forward to this next week and see if we can get that first win.
Hi, Coach. I'm Trent again. I really appreciate because I would think most coaches are, but to me, football, when I was playing for Pleasant View, I loved it for the amount of life lessons it gave me, and how it helped me spiritually as well. So strongly get back into it. But I think really football, it matters if you win or lose. It does, but like at the end of the day, it's the brotherhood bond that you have is really what was most important to me, because I had a chat with when I was a junior with my senior quarterback. I had a chat with him, and it's just a strong brotherhood bond you get from it, and spiritually it helps into so many life lessons. And I agreed with you 100% on what you just said.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's where my responsibility as a coach, is to continue to keep pointing the boys to that. If it's, if we do what we're supposed to do, if we take care of the details, and if we work hard and we have a desire to play for one another, the wins will come. The wins will take care of themselves. Our focus cannot be on the wins. That should be a byproduct of doing the things that we should do. And so we really are trying to emphasize the little details, making good decisions on every play, beating the opponent that's across from us, doing our job, and staying disciplined. And those are all great things that are going to help these young men as husbands, as employees, as hopefully contributors to their church and their community. And so, yeah, I just really hope that that's, even though the adversity we're facing is a little difficult and not the fun that we would enjoy with some victories, the greater victories of how this is shaping these young men and their character is something that we're going to celebrate.
You're absolutely right with that, Coach. And Trent, as he said, we're in agreement of that, of course. We got the last question for you, Coach.
Okay.
We got news about a few weeks back that that you as an organization, the Tennessee Heat football team, officially declared themselves out of playoff contention. So
Correct.
we just wanted to make sure, for those who may not be aware of why that is, why did you guys self-declare out of playoff contention? And moving forward, at least with that, how are you guys going to move forward from that?
Yeah, I think the decision was not an easy one. It was a disappointing one because it was early. The decision was made just after 3 games, and I'd say we had a pretty incredible road ahead of us to make it to the playoffs. But the decision was made because of we just were concerned for being able to put enough young men on the field to be competitive, to protect the young boys that we do have. We just need enough bodies on the field that we felt like we could compete. And so there has been some interest with a couple other boys. One boy that used to play for our team, Caleb Bates, who had a pretty big concussion a couple of years ago and sat out last season. He is a senior this year. He decided he wanted to try to finish up the season and jump on board with us, knowing the decisions that were made by Clint and Kanan and Brock. And then another young man that just kind of came to the equation, a homeschool kid that just didn't know about us, just kind of signed up late. And so we recognize that our opportunity to get them involved, to help us be a little more competitive and not cancel our season. That was, I think, our biggest goal was, and really what the lesson learned for all of our boys is, when you quit a team or you quit on your teammates, one of the unfortunate things is it doesn't just affect your teammates. It affects the cheerleaders. It affects the families and the other opponents, their teams, their schedules, their fun. In life, when we make those decisions that are based on what's best for us, it can have some pretty big waves of negative effect. And so one of our biggest goals for the year, not even ahead of winning a game, was we did not want to harm Swanee. We didn't want to harm Bowling Green Christian or Madisonville or any of these other teams that were looking forward to a football game. And then we just folded it up. So we're going to not only play for our program, but we're going to play for the other teams, our opponents. We do want to beat them. We love the competitive aspect of football, but we also recognize that these are our brothers, and these are kids that we're committed to care for and create a great environment. So, sportsmanship and concern for your opponent is something that we want to be known for as a program.
All right. Well, Coach, we definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your Sunday to come watch us, and best of luck to you guys on the rest of the season.
I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the opportunity, and appreciate all you guys do.
All right. Thanks, man. Thank you, Coach. All right. So we now have Corey Davis from NPA for some more coach tips. Now, Corey, James tells me you're a Ravens fan, but did you at all see anything from the Titans game?
That's false. That's false information.
Oh, really? Who are you a fan of then?
Yeah. I'm actually from the DC area, so I'm a Redskin fan through and through, despite what's taking place.
I was basing off your area.
Yeah.
I believe you guys won Friday night. I know you do a little assistant coaching, so congrats on that win.
You know what? It's been got a whole new coaching staff here. Only one. So I mean, there's a lot of players, but
Are you there?
it looks like we're a little broken up.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me see if it's back on. Should be good.
Can hear you now. All right, we're good. Sounds like we're good.
Okay, cool. All right, so last week we talked about whether or not you are recruitable and talked about some different aspects that you can kind of gauge to see whether or not people will be interested in you. So let's say people are interested in you, and of course this is a lot of things. This is stuff that a lot of kids want to know. We just had a kid from Franklin Classical go to a visit at Washington State. Couple guys have been reaching out to schools and going on visits. So really awesome. Of course, a friend of yours, an ex-player of yours, Bryson Donnell at SEMO. So a lot of guys want to know about this. So let's say that you have determined that you are recruitable. What are some things that you could do to get on track with that when it comes to knowing what coach to talk to, getting exposure and who to talk to when it comes to that? And I know camps are a big thing too, especially before your junior year and then before your senior year. So just kind of cover all of that and what people can do to make themselves a little bit more interesting to coaches or schools.
Right. And one thing you touched on that I'm actually curious to learn more about too was the young man who took the trip to Washington. Was it more so he's got that relationship? Because it's one of those things that's a Power 5 school. A lot of those schools already have in place who they want and who they're going after by the time the season starts. So I'd actually be interested in talking to that young man and learn a little bit more about how his process is going, because that's actually, rather impressive for him. But moving forward, when talking about the whole exposure thing, the relationships and the camp circuit, the biggest thing, everything definitely does start with the relationship with the coach. Whether it's the position coach you get in good with, or whether it's going to be that GA who works for that particular position coach, because that's who your biggest advocate's going to be. The head coach doesn't necessarily come in until the back end of the equation. So a lot of times you're going to be talking to the recruiting coordinator and also to your position particular. Those are going to be the guys that are going to help you move forward in that throughout this whole entire ordeal.
Yeah, and of course, getting a chance to get to know those guys is important. But what are some of the ways that you can connect with some of those assistant coaches and some of the recruiters to kind of get your name in their head and get you on their radar?
The biggest thing is communication. You got to be able to reach out and be relentless in establishing communication first to develop that relationship, whether it's emailing on a daily basis, whether it's calling the office on a daily basis and leaving voicemail on a daily basis. You first definitely have to get on their radar. And that goes back to what we talked about last week with making sure you have the film to justify them taking time, out of their day to even remotely want to talk to you or even remotely have an interest. That ties in what we talked about last week with everything else.
So how big of a part do camps play into that? Because it's a lot of commitment for the kids and for their parents and whoever's helping them to travel to wherever just kind of keep up with where the camps are, to get registered and make the trip to those camps and know exactly what to do when you get there, who to talk to, how to get set up. So it's a lot of commitment. But how important are those? Because it seems like it's a matter of being at the right place at the right time, like you said, and the school that's looking for someone like you, getting eyes on you and you getting in front of them, and that it seems like that plays a big role into it.
So the camp circuit, honestly, is probably one of the trickiest things, especially if you don't have any experience to what's going on or how the game is played. It can be either very discouraging. Because I've worked a lot of camps and I've been at a lot of high-profile camps, 9 out of 10 times as coaches, we know exactly who we're looking. So a lot of other kids, unless you have a relationship established with those coaches who are working the camp or the school that the camp's being hosted at, you're practically just paying your money to go work out. It's a sad truth, but it's the harsh reality. Some of these camps, 400 or 500 kids, you're not going to get a chance to see all 400 or 500. As a kid who is an underdog, who no one may know, you need to do something that's going to stick out and get yourself noticed, whether it's take on the notice everyone's giving attention to and get reps against that player, or you need to have impression to get yourself on the radar so a coach can say, hey, look, here's a kid we may look at who's not on our radar. Because a lot of those kids, especially you already know who you're looking for. You already know those kids who are coming to your camp, that's who you as a coach are going to spend, all your time to, because that's who you're trying to recruit and get to come to your school.
Is there any way that, you could, of course, whenever a camp gets publicized, it kind of tells you, the brochure usually tells you who all is going to be sending scouts to that camp. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you could find out which specific schools, because obviously you don't want to go to a camp that has a school that isn't, let's say you got 10 schools at a camp and none of them are looking for what you're interested in or what you specialize in. Is there a way to find out which specific camps you would profit most from, or is it best to just kind of blanket all of them, or just kind of gamble and pick a few?
Definitely. So, for instance, this past TSU hosted a joint camp with Michigan. Okay, take my current station. I have Jay Sean. He's the number 9 in the class 2019. A kid like Jay Sean at this point of his career doesn't necessarily have to camp anymore. Jay Sean merely just has to show up, do a couple of drills, and he's done for the day, because he's 6'4", 195 pounds, and runs like a gazelle. So at that same particular camp, you get a kid like an Austin Moore. No one really knows who Austin really is. So he's trying radar. But because he had an established relationship with who was there in the building, he was there specifically to show himself in front of Lindsey Wilson and to get himself hopefully discovered by somebody else. And so that's where having that relationship already established will benefit you at camp. If you know you're not a player of a high-level recruit, you want to try to concentrate your efforts on some of the smaller camps. And some of those camps are hit or miss. NTSU had a camp where they got 3 camp sessions. Well, that first camp session had 200 kids. Well, then that second camp session had only 60 kids. So it's definitely a roll of the dice. Definitely 200 kids. You're going to have to do something impressive. 60 kids, you get way more eyes on you right then and there.
I got you. Well, Coach, we appreciate you coming on, and obviously it's something where we want to see a lot more 8-man kids able to play at the college level, and as that happens, I think it'll help grow the game and give a better reputation for that. But we really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll see a lot more kids hit the camp circuit and be able to get into good schools.
Hey, quick question off here. How's Brandon Miner doing this season?
Miner is doing well. Let me pull up his stats real quick. I know he has, I want to say about 32 tackles. I think he has like 32 tackles and 2 sacks after Friday. I think he had a pretty big game.
Is he a junior or is he a senior this season?
He's a senior this year.
Steve, and that's a kid. I know he hit the camp circuit a little bit, just from stuff I saw on Instagram and Twitter. Mm-hmm. That's a kid who right now, if you turn on his film, and I haven't seen none of his film this year, I just know based off of past experience and having to scout and get prepared for him, that's a kid who at the next level, who currently right now he's out of position for what he's trying to play, but next level, that's a kid who's probably going to be like a weak side linebacker, strong safety. So when you talk about recruiting, he's out of position now. He's got to work extra hard to just prove that he can even play in position at that next level.
But I think at the same time, I think he's proved that he can do that. He's definitely he has the work ethic to do that. But yeah. And the hard thing about that too is the film. Sometimes teams struggle to get film even to their own players. So that's an area that people can and schools can improve on. And part of that goes back to being. It comes back to more teams caring about getting their kids in college and investing in them as opposed to just having a team and just providing a service to players.
Yeah, because I think a kid like Wes who played at Webb last year, I think that's a kid who could have played next level ball. But that's that'll be another topic for another day we can hit on.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time to talk to us, and good luck on the rest of your season. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
right, man. No doubt. See you guys soon.
All right, take it easy.
And that's Corey Davis from NPA, who's given some players some college recruiting advice for those who had not done the research prior, so they have some access to that. All right, so we have now our previews for this coming week, and of course Trent and James will go back and forth on their records and such. What's the standing right now for both your records on predictions?
I don't know.
Well,
I've lost 3. That's all I know.
I think I've lost 1, 2.
Oh, bull.
We might be tied at 3. I know that we're I'm doing a little pick'em competition with Jonathan Thompson over at Tennessee 8-Man Weekly. Of course, you can hear that every Tuesday night. He posts a link for that. But I know right now the competition between me and him, I'm 15-6. He's 3-8. So little edge there that I hold over him. I had a bigger. I picked a few more games wrong than he did. So
wait. Let me make sure here. You're 15-6. You're 15-6. He's 3-8. Those numbers don't add up.
13-8.
Oh, he's 13-8. Okay,
You said 3. Those numbers add up, by the way.
Of course. All right, so let's go through the competitions here we got for this week. As always, the broadcast games that we're doing go last. So we'll start out first. South Haven Christian School Patriots are hosting the Hendersonville Christian Academy Crusaders. It's been a while since we've seen Hendersonville, and we only saw them. Trent and I saw him in the second week of the season against Madisonville, and in the first week, James and I saw him against the Heat. So we saw both of them back to back on how they started their 2-0 run, but then we haven't seen their 2 or 3 losses in a row that they've had. So, and seeing how the Patriots are and how much they can rack up points and how they're still undefeated, it's hard to say if South Haven will stay undefeated with this, but I think Hendersonville, they may be able to get out of this this winless streak that they have going on. I believe they're at an even 2-2 right now on their record. But James, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the scores from this game and everything.
South Haven, at the same time, they've been off for it'll be 3 weeks on Friday when they go to play Hendersonville. So, those guys will need to knock a little bit of the rust off. Of course, they lost their backup quarterback, Andrew Crawley. Had a season-ending injury, and then had surgery on it on Tuesday. Kobe Rojo could potentially be back. If they don't, I know they have Xavier Vincent, who can play like a hybrid quarterback. I know they got some packages for him. So, it'll be interesting to see how they roll him out and use him. But at the same time, for a team like them, they've got a huge game coming up with the Christian community next week. And so, they definitely don't want to show too much in case someone from Christian community is there. And who knows, the Christian community could get that Hendersonville film and get a chance to scout on them. So, you don't want to show too much, but at the same time, you want to show enough to where everything is smooth. They know what it's different doing it in practice as opposed to doing it in a game situation. So you definitely want to get guys comfortable doing something in a game situation. But like I said, you don't want to show too much, and I think that's what South Haven's going up against. For Hendersonville, they've struggled the last couple of weeks. They've got some injury, so they've got some players banged up that they're trying to heal. Bader's struggling a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that, and if they can develop a running game. They've struggled with their running game, and I think that's something that could, I don't know if it'll work against South Haven or not. I know they have a great passing attack. And that might be something that they try to work a little extra on. Of course, losing Crawley, who was their starting cornerback the first couple games of the year. They've got another freshman over at cornerback, and they've got some younger players.
I do want to check something real quick. The helmet schedule says that it doesn't indicate who's the home team for this game.
It's at South Haven. Yeah, sorry about that. I think it got missed in production, but that game is at South Haven, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see too. It'll be interesting to see how Hendersonville uses that bigger field. That a little bit. I think it's still a 40-80, but at the same time, it just seems like there's more space when it comes to the game. So it's a little bit harder with Hendersonville. The fences are right up on the field, whereas South Haven it's a little more open. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust to that, and if they decide to air the ball out, continue to air the ball out, or if they try to develop some sort of run game. to take some pressure off Bader.
Well, and prediction-wise, I'm going to go with Hendersonville this week. Yeah, that might kick me in the butt. I'm going to go with Hendersonville this week. I really like Bader. I believe because they got athletes on their team, and you can teach an athlete how to play wide receiver. So I believe they can, and I know they already got some wide receivers. So I'm going to pick Hendersonville. I'm not saying South Haven's bad or anything. They're good, as they have shown. The reason why I'm going to pick them is with all the injuries South Haven's getting. And then they got X. Did they play X at quarterback last week?
3 weeks ago, they used them a little bit against Riverside. They haven't played 3 weeks. They had last week off, and then the game was canceled. And then the game was canceled 2 weeks ago against the Heat. So they haven't played since they went down to Riverside 3 weeks ago. It'll be 3 weeks on Friday. But I think they did use X some. I think Rojo and Crawley were banged up enough to where they had to use him some.
Well, I mean, that gives South Haven 3 weeks of practice, which coaches would love to have that after you get to your two quarterbacks banged up. I'm sure their coaches love that practice time to get another one in there. So it might not even be X that plays quarterback because they might have found a diamond in the rough during practice. So, but I'm going to take Hendersonville this week. I think it's going to be a good game.
I have South Haven picked for this game, and I am going to pull an executive decision because I think preseason, I had Hendersonville picked, but I'm going to pick South Haven this week. I'm going to change it up a little bit. So I've got South, and also in the spirit of competition, I'm going to pick South Haven. Trent's going to pick Hendersonville, and loser buys the other McChicken.
And calling an audible here on a week of full slate games. This is the first week that we have every team active in MTAC, as well as our only independent team we're covering, Madisonville. There are 2 more weeks remaining of that on the 29th of September, and then on the final week, October 11th. So we're looking forward to getting all the score updates and everything from those games. And moving on with our predictions here, Franklin Christian Academy hosts Lighthouse Christian School. Lighthouse had 2 11-man games on the schedule. They canceled those. They had a bye week on August 11th, and they had a bye week this week for September 8th. They were going to play their first game at Hendersonville on September 1st, but they canceled that game due to storms and the field not being up to par. So Lighthouse has gone 5 weeks into the season. All the other teams are experiencing such, and they have not played a game yet. And I believe James tried to reach out to their coach to even get their rosters just to get an idea of who's playing for them, and we haven't received that yet. But I'm sure
should be getting that tomorrow if they got it worked out. But it's like you said, so with South Haven having 3 weeks of practice, that's ideal. But at the same time, Lighthouse has gotten 5 weeks to work with some kids potentially that have never played football. So they've had 5 weeks to kind of get ready, and they've also had an opportunity to scout a lot of teams and watch a lot of games and get an eye on those. So they kind of have a little bit of a head start going into Friday.
Yeah, and I'm not discrediting them for having a 5 week bye. It's we did mention as well that they decided not to start practice until the first week of school. So they didn't have that advantage of getting chemistry with the players built up and having their pre season training camps and all of that. So it's always a balance such. But the other interesting thing to look at is FCA. They're coming off of their first win of the season from Riverside. So they have some momentum coming from that game, especially almost a 60-point victory there. But what it comes down to is we just don't know what Lighthouse has. We don't know if they're going to come as a shocker through the season or if they're just going to have a complete flop. But it is notable to mention that this is the rematch of the consolation game from last year. So it'll be really interesting to see if Lighthouse wants revenge for that game or if they don't have the skills necessary to get that revenge there. But either way, James, you'll be at that game, right? Well, we'll get into that when we get later into the show, but you'll be at that game watching it with your kid and such while we're broadcasting another game. So you're going to be able to see that firsthand.
Yeah, more than likely I'll go over and check that out, just kind of get an eye on Lighthouse. And we cover them 2 more times this year, so we got 2 out of their 5 games, I believe, with Bowling Green Christian and then South Haven Christian. So it'll be interesting to get those games broadcasted. And then, like I said, more than likely I'll check out that game while you guys are across the street. But, I'm looking forward to seeing what Lighthouse has. There's been a lot of, I'd say there's been a lot of talk, but no one really knows what to expect. And that can work to your advantage, because guys, like Frank and Christian, they don't know how to prepare. They can't prepare specifically for it. It's like opening night all over again. You don't know what they have. And so you just have to work on the fundamentals and use the momentum off a big win against Riverside to carry you into that game. And then if you're Lighthouse, like I said, you've had an opportunity to watch some FCA games. I would be surprised if they didn't watch the game against Riverside and watch some of these other ball games that they've got coming up. So they've had an opportunity to do some scouting.
Yeah, and I'm going to go straight off with my prediction again. I'm going to choose FCA this week.
I got the pick too.
Oh, okay. But the reason I want to pick FCA is because I really like their defense. I really like Miner. I really like Weeks. I like Shindell. I like the really funny dude as in the All-Star game last year. I forgot his name. Yes, Quibido. I really like their defense. They got so many defensive weapons. And like you said, it's hard for me to pick Lighthouse after not seeing them, after teams have 5 weeks or at least – how many games have FCA played?
FCA's played 3, and then they had 2 weeks off. So they played 3 games in 5 weeks.
So you're going up against a team that has already played 3 games. And that's going to hurt Lighthouse because – you have a team that has veterans on it, and then you have a team that them veterans have already have 3 games this season, and all their other players have. And it's just better when you get to play the games. And I feel bad for Lighthouse because they've had games on their schedule that's unfortunately got canceled. But I'm interested to see Lighthouse because whenever I was at Pleasant View, when you heard Lighthouse, you were thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a tough game." So, the Lighthouse got that persona with me. That's their persona. They always have a good team. But I'm going to take FCA.
Yeah, and we've mentioned a little bit on previous broadcasts and such there with FCA's defense. There's a reason why Shaka Hill has been the same defensive coordinator, the longest coaching defensive coordinator in the league. And he's the only one who's been around for so long, about 6 years now, because their defense has stayed up to par and stayed dominant under his coaching. So James will be able to see that game at FCA, and that's FCA's home opener. They've been on the road for the rest of their games, so that'll be good for them to get some time at Jim Warren Park. The last team in the north, Christian Community, they will be at Riverside this next Friday. Now, it is annotated on the schedule that we will be broadcasting that game, but we will call an audible and we'll announce which game we are broadcasting in just a few moments. And James won't say anything yet. I'm sure you didn't hear what he said there, but Riverside hosting Christian Community. We talked a little bit with Coach Creasy after the game about what he expected with that, and he said that it's an opportunity for them to potentially make an upset and facing one of the best, which I like that attitude of that, regardless of how Christian Community is undefeated, that they're ready for any competition they have. But even though it's not detrimental to their South record and such, and although Riverside what looks like an unrealistic chance of them even making the bowl game at this point, they are still optimistic, as Coach Creasy said in his interview after the game on Friday. They're still optimistic. They're still ready to play and such. But Christian Community, I think, James, you had them predicted 9-1, predicting winning every game. I mean, is there anything you saw from Riverside on Friday night that they could potentially upset Christian Community with?
Well, I don't know if it's so much that they can upset it with, but I think there's things that they can work on and things they can develop. Trey Henn, that was his first game playing quarterback against FCA. And so, he was just kind of getting a feel for it and learning how to transition from being a running back to being a running quarterback and learn the differences between that. You still got to make the throws. You still got to be able to get your timing down right. They'll have another week. He'll have another week to work with receivers. Something that I think they need to develop is their passing attack. Adam Hamilton had 250 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns against South Haven. And, he had another touchdown he had the touchdown on Friday night, the only one. So, on the year, he's had a really good season, and they have other guys that they can work with. Riley Hall, I know, is a sophomore, and he can catch the football. But the last 2 weeks, I've really been baffled by their lack of throwing and just their dedication to running the football, even when it doesn't work. And I have a lot of love for Coach Creasy, a lot of love for Riverside. I love going down there. I love those guys. Great ball team. But, I think that that's something that they can work on and develop and need to in order to stay competitive in these games. I mean, you don't want to go into every game and lose 65-6 and score your last touchdown like on your last drive of the game. I mean, that's not ideal. That's not what you want. So that's something that those guys can work on. CCS has never played at Riverside. Their previous 2 matchups, Riverside went to CCS their first year playing 8-man, and then of course last year was their second meeting, and that was in the bowl game. So CCS never played at Riverside, so it'll be a new experience for some of those guys. I think some of them might have gone down for JV. I know they've gone down there and played JV, but never played a varsity game there. So it'll be a cool experience for those guys getting to go to that field for the first time. But Trent, I don't know is there anything that Riverside can do that you've seen, because you've seen both teams, is there anything they can do to adjust and potentially pull? Is there a weak area that CCS has that Riverside could pull an upset from?
Their offensive line. I noticed, and I think I mentioned this once before, the Sewanee Riverside game, I watched one guy, and he did countless times. His hand placement wasn't that good on the offensive line, and they got that huge 8th grader. And they didn't use his size, get his feet work corrected, get him be able to, because CCS, they're gonna you at the line. That's where their strongest is, their defensive line. They're gonna fight you at that line, and so if they're gonna want to have a chance at this game, they gotta make sure their offensive line is ready to go toe to toe with the best. It's kind of actually tricky because FCA's best part of their defensive line is their defensive line as well. And so potentially the best defensive line in Intact, you got to be ready to go toe-to-toe with them guys, get them at the line. And if Riverside is planning on running the ball against that defensive front of CCS, they're going to have to get their offensive line guys ready. And if their offensive line guys are playing like they have been, it's going to be a run-through with CCS. And I'm going to pick CCS this week.
CCS picked as well.
Yeah, so both of you guys going with Christian Community on that. So we'll see how good of a game that is going into Friday night. All right, so down to the south, we already said Riverside hosting CCS. The Webb School at 6 p.m. instead of 7, they are hosting the Madisonville Defenders, and that is the opening home game for the Webb School. That is where the MTAC Championship will be hosted this year, with Curry Ingram pulling out of the conference. So it'll be interesting to see how Madisonville goes down there on turf where champions will be made, quite literally. But Madisonville, they're still on that winless streak, unfortunately, and just losing to Bowling Green and such. I mean, Madisonville does put up a fight against teams they face. Like we saw that Trent and I saw that in the Hendersonville game and such. But Trent, looking at seeing how much of a fight Webb put up against New Life and going into this game on Friday against the Defenders. I mean, is there any sort of challenge that Madisonville will have to overcome to potentially either lose this game in a close match or potentially win this game by a low score?
So, if I'm not correct, there is Madisonville versus Webb. Madisonville versus Webb. Yes, there is. I think I saw a really strong point. They have a good defense. They have good defensive players. Number 4 on Madisonville, Hunter, and Eddie. I can't remember. Eddie Brown is number 74 in their defensive line, anchoring it, and he does a superb job of doing that. And I believe it's just hard to say because I only watched one game in Madisonville, so there's not a lot to say. And those 2 players are the people that kind of showed out for me. But yeah, I think that's the best key. I'm gonna take Webb on this game. It's just. But I believe if Eddie can really tear down that offensive wall they got, that they might have a chance. And I would love to see Madisonville get their first win on their what is the streak now?
Their streak would be at 0-11 right now because they lost 8 games last year and then they're 0-3 so far. So 0-11 so far.
Yeah, I'd like to see them come out with a win, but I'm going to pick Webb this week. What about you, James?
Yeah, so we'll see if Webb can fulfill the predictions from James and Trent, or if they will have a shocker. It's possible. Anything can happen in 8-man football. So now we get into the game, the game that we will be broadcasting that is not annotated on the football schedule, the helmet schedule. And this game is truly primetime Friday Night Lights, one of the best games of the week, maybe even one of the best games of the season that we have broadcasted up to this point. And that will be
definitely the highest stakes.
Highest stakes, yes. Franklin Classical School Knights hosting the St. Andrews Suwannee Mountain Lions. And this is essentially, we mentioned it a lot on the broadcast last night, so you may have gotten some hints that we'd be going to that game. But St. Andrews Suwannee and Franklin Classical School are both undefeated right now. And this is essentially for first place in the MTAC South. And both of these teams know what's on the line going into this game. They exactly know what's going in. It's basically a better spot for the playoffs, because as far as we've seen with Webb, they are only 1-0 because they have one game against a team in the North. We don't know what to expect with Webb on if they could possibly try to make a run for that first or second slot there. But from what we've seen from the Heat and Classical, this could essentially determine who is facing the number 2 seed in the North and who is facing the number one seed in the North in the playoff semifinals, and potentially even who faces each other in the bowl game because of Webb. But this game is so high stakes. I have a feeling James may say it's a toss-up game, but he'll root to his predictions from the preseason and such. But we've seen both of these teams play. They both have such strong suits about them. What's the weakness for each of these teams that Suwannee and Classical will have to try and figure out so that they can get a victory and get the higher seed in the South?
Well, for Suwannee, I would have to say the one weakness that they do have, obviously, they don't have a passing attack because that's not their offense. So I think they make it a little bit easier while it's hard at the same time. They make it easier because Classical still has to prepare for a passing attack, but at the same time, they can hone more so in on the rushing attack for Suwannee. And for Suwannee, they've got a good defense, but I think something that they're going to have to work on is the passing defense for these guys. They have not faced. They faced Bowling Green, and Bowling Green was able to put up 19 on them and match them, tit for tat, and just go right back and go back and forth with them. So that's something that Suwannee struggled with. Swannee's got to be able to keep the ball off the ground. They did that a lot against Riverside. But for Classical, their weakness, they really can't stop the run. They have not stopped the run. Obviously, I know they did well against Freedom, and that was good to see. But, it's gotten better as the season's gone on. But I think that that Suwannee's such a different animal, and it's something that teams aren't used to, and so it's something that they can use to their advantage. You mentioned that this is potentially for first place. It's for current first place, and we want to clarify that. We don't want anybody to be upset. We want to clarify. This is for first place right now. Franklin Christian and Webb, after this week, I think they have all MTAC South games. Maybe Franklin Christian has one difference. Is it checking the schedule?
Yeah, looking at the schedule here. Let's see. Franklin Christian, their schedules, they just won against Riverside. They have Lighthouse this Saturday. Then they go to Suwannee. They host the Heat. They host Webb, and then they have a bye week, and then go to FCS. As for Franklin Classical, they have Suwannee this Friday. They go to Webb. They go to Hendersonville. They host CCS. They have a bye week, and then they face FCA. And for Suwannee, they go to FCS this Friday. Then they host Franklin Christian. Then they host Madisonville. They host Hendersonville. They have a bye week, and then they host Webb. So they do have a good amount of South games in there. Now, as James said, it's a matter for first place now, but because these teams don't face each other again, this could be the game that sort of puts one over the other in terms of ranking, but anything can happen in 8-man football, and Trent, of course, over here going to give his picks on it as well, but James does have something else he needs to do.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting with the playoffs, based on what happens tonight and the next few weeks, potentially if you have Swanee win the South and let's say South Haven goes second seed in the North, that would be interesting because South Haven's never played Swanee. They've never played at Swanee. So we would get a completely fresh matchup the first game of the playoffs, which is always interesting because on one side, you like to see two teams that have a rivalry, that have gone at each other for forever. You love to see that in the playoffs, but at the same time, it's interesting seeing two teams that have never played, never matched up, have no history. And that would also set us up for a CCS Franklin Classical or CCS Franklin Christian. If South Haven won the North, it would put, there's so many combinations that could lead to. But I think that, with between all the schedules coming up, it's really going to be interesting to see how everything sorts itself out, especially over the next 2 weeks.
Okay, I just remembered something. We're going to see the best nose tackle and center matchup in MTech this coming up Friday.
Josh Austin and Jalen Tillman.
It exactly is. I cannot wait to see that because I don't think I hurt anybody's feelings. I mean, there's a lot of good linemen in MTech, but I really want to. If you can shut your mic off, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see this because I really like Josh Austin, and I really like the defensive line. I'm sorry, his name is coming up to me right now. I like the defensive line anchor for Sewanee after watching him the last game against Riverside, and I really want to see that. I really want to see that matchup. I'm really excited to see that. But Sewanee versus FCS, I think it's a big toss-up game because both teams are good. But both teams are really good, and like I said, it's potential for the first place right now for the South, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really happy we chose to broadcast that game. Called our honorable, but I'm going to take. I'm going to take FCS.
I took FCS. Okay,
I'm going to take FCS because at Sewanee they don't have that throwing game. But their coach kind of looked at me. The last Sewanee game is like, just get ready. We're going to have a throwing game. But I'm just going to take FCS right now because I haven't seen that throwing game yet.
Now I will say that. When I'm looking at the game history here, of course, last year they had the 12-6 Swanee win, first game of the year. Just a shocker that it was so low scoring. But the rivalry so far between the two is at 4-4. In 2008, they played each other, and Swanee won 14-12. Of course, both of them were playing 11-man. That was the year class. After that, in 8-man, I want to say that Classical holds the edge 4-3, and that's just a bunch of games in September. So big rivalry here for these two. Kind of one of the understated rivalries, but at the same time they've played each other forever, and it's always a knockdown, drag-out fight. 2014, Swanee came away with a 36-34 win. So it's. Actually, I'm sorry. The score here is doubled, so the standing is 3-3 between these two teams because the score is doubled. In 8-man, it's 3-3. So another 3-3 rivalry that, like we saw this past Friday, but a lot of history between these two. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
And you guys both have FCS winning, but we'll see exactly how that plays out in the Extreme Game of the Week for Friday night. That'll be live on our YouTube channel, 8-Man Extreme. Coverage will begin about 6:30, 6:45 Central Standard Time. And our final game for coverage, a Saturday game that's not a matinee, it's a night game. And that's up in Mount Juliet. The Tennessee Heat will be hosting the Bowling Green Christian Academy Warriors. Now, Bowling Green, fresh off of their victory over Madisonville, getting their first win on the season. The Heat still looking for that victory, but it's possible that Bowling Green could still have this travel down here and get it. I don't want to say an easy victory because the Heat always put up a good fight, But at least with the way the Heat are playing, especially with some of the players leaving and some of the unfortunate strain that has been put on the underclassmen to step up and such. I mean, it's going to be an interesting game to see. But I think with the Heat, even though they're hosting the game, it may be that Bowling Green may pull out very well, even with the travel, and that the travel won't be a fatigue on them. It might be a Bowling Green victory there, but Trent, of course, you've said your piece on Bowling Green and how you believe they are one of the best teams, and they will potentially do very well next year in MTAC because of all the young players that they have, of course. But looking at this game, is the Heat going to be a challenge for them?
I have no favorites, but I really like Bowling Green. Just want to point that out because if y'all listen to me, I really sway to Bowling Green's way a lot, but I really like their team. Heat, they're probably the coaches. We just talked to their coach. Sorry, I'm really bad with names. Don't get offended. Ryan Scott. We just talked to them. We just talked to him about his young players. That you had 3 guys leave your team. You got to fill places. And if they were starters, I don't know if they were. I know Clint was, and that lineman was.
Starting quarterback. So I would say that's important.
Yeah, okay. You can hand the ball off to a running back. Places to fill. I'm going to take Bowling Green. I'm going to take Bowling Green here for this game. I really like their passing game. I think it's really fluid. I think the offense, their offensive coordinator runs the plays they run through it really flows well. So I'm gonna take Bowling Green for this game.
I've actually got the Heat picked for this game, and I think that this is one of those. It's like I asked Coach Scott earlier. I think this is one of those winnable games. I think a win against Madison, a 70-point win against Madisonville is deceiving. And, I see what they did. And, of course, they fixed some of the mistakes they made against South Haven and had a really tight ball game with Swanee. Bowling Green comes out and passes the ball. The Heat struggle against that. And so it could be that they come up with a win. But I'm going to take the Heat in this one. I'm going to take the home team and see what they can do. It's tough to go through what they went through and then go on the road to Swanee at 4 p.m. on a Friday. But at the same time, if they can come back and get in front of that home crowd and have an extra day of practice, I think that'll definitely benefit them.
Yeah, and that'll be a Saturday night game, and we'll be broadcasting that live from Mount Juliet. And coverage for that will begin about 6:45 Central Standard Time. All right, that'll essentially wrap up the show. Went for an hour and a half there. Still a good show with a lot of good things, such. And, of course, got that interview with Ryan Scott, which is brought to you by Kentucky RV Sales. Be sure to look them up on kyrvsales.com. to look at their website, look at their deals and such. You can also search them up on Facebook, kyrvsales.com, and they will, of course, post a lot of good offers there on their Facebook page and on their website and such. They got a lot of good offers and such. I believe, James, actually, you may have posted something recently about one of their recent offers that they did.
I've posted several, and these guys are I love what they do, and I love their lot. I was able to stop by and see it the other day when I went up to the practice up in Madisonville, and I was really impressed with their selection. They don't just, specialize in a little bit of everything. And actually, right now, not a lot of people are wanting to travel around, but at the same time, they've got a big reduction sale going on. You can get so many things at a great price. You can get a Zinger Light Z1. For $12,900, you can get one for $10,900, $11,400. They've got some great deals going on with those guys. So make sure you check them out on Facebook. Check out their website, kyrvsales.com. You can call them at 270-821-4000 and talk to the guys up there. They've got some great salesmen that'll get you hooked up. Mike Jones is a great guy, and we're really blessed to have those guys as an owner. as a sponsor rather.
Yeah, and you look at that as well. The Kentucky RV salespeople, they posted our helmet picture, the promo picture when we went up there for the Madisonville game and such. Said good luck to the defenders, which was really cool of them to do. Anyway, with that, I believe we are essentially going to wrap up the show here. But James got one more thing.
So I want to tease y'all. Speaking of Southwest Kentucky football, I heard that on it'll be 2 weeks from tomorrow. There's a school called Heritage Christian Academy up in Hopkinsville, and they're a big, good-sized school. They have every sport but football. They're a powerhouse. They've won several titles. A couple of their kids are actually playing for Madisonville, but I heard that they were interested in football. So it'd be really cool if those guys could jump on board and have a team, or, it's possible that Madisonville could turn into, instead of having Madisonville, it'll just be Heritage Christian, which of course they're in separate cities, but it'd be really interesting to see if Heritage can get a team up and running. They've got great facilities. They've got a great program and a great school. So I'm excited. We could be adding another team next year. We'll see how that meeting goes.
Yeah, adding another team next year, as well as potentially getting back several teams that unfortunately dropped out, such as the Central Baptist School Defenders and the Tennessee School for the Deaf. Of course, Trent here saying we're hope that maybe Pleasant View will come back. Who knows? That's dependent on them. So want to thank you once again for tuning into Extreme Radio, built by MDI Construction Inc. Just go to MDIConst.com or search up MDI Construction Inc. on Facebook for all of your commercial projects, as well as to see their projects they're working on right now, so you can get an idea of their quality service. Get an idea. Now, don't just take it from us. Look at their Facebook page. Even though from us, we're the most reliable source when it comes to the best construction companies. So that'll do it for James Shannon and Trent Legate and all the hardworking people here, which is the three of us on 8-Man Extreme. This is Spencer Thompson saying have a good rest of your weekend, as well as the rest of the NFL kickoff weekend, and we'll see you on Friday. See you guys.